Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of ProjectPro's AI Monetization podcast, where we speak with industry leaders on business outcomes using AI. I'm Binny Mathews. I'm the co-founder of ProjectPro. Today, we have with us Aditi Kalra. Aditi has almost 9 years experience as a data scientist across a variety of financial services companies from American Express, Fidelity, TransUnion, and currently she's with Slice, which is a fintech unicorn where she's a senior manager data science. Aditi was also recently, awarded part of the 40 under 40 data scientists by the Analytics India magazine. Aditi, thanks for taking time to do this. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vinny. Thank you for those kind words. Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. So Aditi, to begin with, there's lots of people listening to this who don't necessarily have a programming background academically, but would like to do data science. That's one. And second, with the way AI is being adopted, there's lots of non-technical users who are looking to get value from this technical revolution. So, and you studied economics, undergrad, master's economics. How did that career journey happen from studying economics to being a senior data scientist at a fintech unicorn?
Yeah, I mean, I almost get asked this question every time that, how did an economics graduate and a postgraduate reach to the industry of data science? So I feel that there's a lot of misconception that economics has nothing to do with data science. A lot of my subjects that I took, especially in the postgrad, were about econometrics and statistics, which are kind of the baseline or form the basis of all the data science concepts, right? We may not be using it directly in our day-to-day lives, but like when we deep dive into the different aspects or the formulas or the algorithms that are being used, the knowledge is easily replicated there, right? So we did have some level of coding in our colleges, but not to the level which we see in our daily jobs. So yeah, I mean, my base was set during my college years. And then when I moved to especially American Express, I took a lot of courses on coding. So I started with OOPS programming. So there I learned a little bit of Java and more of Python. And then later I ventured into PySpark and so on and so forth, depending on what projects I was assigned. So I would say my major learning happened on the job with different projects that came in. Right. So American Express primarily being a credit card company, right? There I was handling customer analytics and data science on the customer side, right? So there I was exposed to a lot of projects on cross-sell, upsell, and the traditional machine learning algorithms I learned there. And my managers were really nice enough to give me that time, especially during my starting years, to have that kind of learning, since I was not particularly coming from an engineering background per se, right? And then when I moved to Fidelity, again, with a great leadership team there as well, I was assigned some great projects on the wealth management side. So there I not only got a glimpse of how HNI customers are handled by Fidelity, from the business perspective, but also designs machine learning and AI solutions for them. I also happen to work a little bit on the recommender systems there. So this kind of increased my breadth of AI knowledge in Fidelity. And then when I finally landed here at Slice, so being a startup, right, you need to do everything from the ground level, right? So I got a flavor of managing a team of individuals, as well as we could also try our hands at generative AI, which had just come at that time, right? And then we explored machine learning solution on the KYC side, on the CX side, like building bots and so on and so forth. And then also building solutions for the fraud and the compliance perspective, right? So being in a startup also gives you that flavor of, fast implementation, because the time period from planning to execution is very small to have a competitor in advantage, right? So I think Slice helped me in just having a very steep learning curve in terms of executing and deploying your ideas or your projects very
Mhm.
fast.
Makes sense. And given that in financial services, you've worked at a retail bank, at a leading card company, at a wealth management or a fund house, and currently at a fintech, what is the difference in the nature of the problems that you solve at each of these kind of financial services companies?
Yeah. So I think when I was at, I would say, American Express, right?
Yeah.
It's primarily credit card industry. So the problems were mostly about, how you can increase your sale of credit cards, how you
Mm,
can, optimize your rewards,
mm,
or how, you can satisfy your customers from the experience perspective, because Amex is known for its
mm.
very well customer experience,
Yeah.
right? So and then things became a little, the target population became a little different when I went
Mm,
to Fidelity,
mm,
because there, being part of the wealth management group, we were just, I mean, at least I was just handling the HNI customers, and
mm,
it was primarily for the US market,
mm.
right? And even Amex was for the US market. The stark difference that came for me when I was in an Indian startup, which is currently Slice,
Yeah.
because the Indian market is very, very different from the US market. The
Mhm.
language, obviously, and the, if you even see the tickets or the complaints, that we get from the customers,
Yeah.
they're very different from what you see in case of Amex or Fidelity,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, the experience was very different. And as I said right earlier as well, being in a startup, you have to build everything from scratch.
Yeah.
The Amex and Fidelity being kind of vintage companies, they've been here for a really long time. The
Yeah.
systems have already been built,
Hmm.
right? And they're very mature. But
Right.
in a startup, since you're just growing, you're part
Hmm.
of that growth phase. You
Hmm.
get to learn a lot, and you
Hmm.
get to see those things being built in front of you.
Yeah.
And at times you can actually see your solutions being
Hmm.
live on the app, and it gives you a great level of satisfaction,
Right.
where in other, in the like big companies, it takes a little time
Yeah.
to see your results.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge difference.
Got it. Got it. Makes sense. And early in this conversation, you mentioned how at a startup like Slice, things just are the pace of releasing projects, etc., are much faster than at more traditional companies, right? And I'm sure there are reasons for that. But if you could, and we all roughly understand that startups are faster, but if you could help us understand exactly, right, what is faster? Why does it get? How does it go faster, and how much faster is it in a project? If you could just help us understand that, that'd be great.
I think it also depends on the age group of people which are there in startups, right? If you
Hmm.
see, I mean, I'm not generalizing, but mostly the average age of people in a startup, especially if I talk about Slice, would be somewhere 26, 27. So
Hmm.
these are a bunch of, people who have come from college,
Yeah.
and they have taken big, big responsibilities within the company,
Hmm.
and they have that drive and everything to prove,
Hmm.
right? And being in a very competitive landscape where you've just turned a unicorn, and you
Hmm.
want to, eventually at some point, from a fintech perspective, become a bank at some point, if you want
Yeah.
to, you need to be very fast. So if I have to give you an example, our average, you can have projects which can be delivered within 2 to 3 weeks, or you can have projects which can be delivered within 3 months, which is again very a small timeline as compared to other companies
Yeah.
where they have long yearly projects,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Because like if a feature they have to release right now, from a
Hmm.
startup perspective, if they
Hmm.
take time, then somebody else would do it before you, and
Right.
then you don't have that competitive advantage anymore,
Hmm.
right? So it becomes very important that and I think one more important thing is the hierarchy in a startup is very less,
Hmm.
right? So the degree of approvals that you have to go through is less as compared to a bigger company,
Yeah.
where you have a larger hierarchy, right?
Hmm.
And I think coming from an Indian startup where everybody's on the same floor,
Yeah.
on the same office,
Hmm.
it's easier to drive projects faster rather
Yeah.
than when you have a offshore and a onshore manager,
Yeah.
right? Because you have to connect, and then that also takes some time. So
Makes
I think
sense.
that really helps like if you ever go to a startup, the buzz that you find on the office floor, it's just very enticing.
Right. You know, next, it'd be great to talk about kind of the core of what we are planning to talk about, which is conversational AI. So, me personally, right, Aditi, which is, I would say 30% of my Slack interactions are voice messages. Um, 10-20% of my WhatsApp interactions are voice messages. And I would say 100% of my chat GPT on my phone interactions is voiced on the app, right? So it'll be helpful to get your perspective on when you say conversational AI, what exactly do we refer to? What kind of problems do you anticipate that solving? I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think conversational AI is actually now a fancy word. It's not like we never had chatbots earlier. They
Yeah.
were like the companies were anyways building chatbots like about what 5 years back as well. But the degree of, I would say, humanness has increased a lot. It becomes now a little difficult to differentiate whether an agent, like an actual human being, is sitting at the back solving your query, or is it a bot?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that makes it more what we call as a conversational AI, which is like a more human form of AI that understands the context of the conversation much better and is able to reply to whatever question or query that you are asking.
Yeah. And just to understand, so does that mean the conversational way of interacting with AI is a different way of interacting than the agentic way of interacting with AI? Are these two different things you think, or do they belong together? Or
yeah, so the AI agents are, you can say, a way of building the conversational AI. So if I have to define very technically, I'm not sure if you're talking about the agents term that we are hearing a lot these days, right?
Yeah, yeah.
These are nothing but you can understand as patches of code which have been assigned very specific tasks. And when different of these different agents combine together, they achieve the complete task. So if I have to just give you an example, right?
Yeah.
If you're building a conversational bot, right? So maybe one agent would have just the task to understand that if the query that the customer is asking, is it a relevant query or is it a very generic query? So like if I'm talking about my company's perspective, which is a fintech, right? If it's a financial query, or is it like a customer is just trying to mess up with the bot, right? Like we have heard in the news recently, right? Then there'll be another agent which will try to categorize that query into different products. So being a financial company, you would have different products. Then there will be another agent which will try to boil down to the exact question that the customer is asking, connect it to the reply, and give it back to the customer.
Yeah.
Right. So just like a microservice architecture, right? You have pieces of code which have their own memory and task assigned, and they are performing a very specific task. But when they come together, they kind of make the whole system work.
Got it. So you're basically saying you could have or don't have agents, but the conversational aspect is basically humanizing that technology. It is the layer with which you will interact with AI. That's basically what you're saying.
So these agents are actually enabling that conversational AI piece, right? Now, there are systems which help you build these agents, and then there are also systems which help you to orchestrate these agents, right? And when these come together, they help you achieve that conversational aspect, which was not there earlier. So if you talk about the traditional approaches, right? Even then we were building models for tasks, right? But they were not able to achieve the precision that these models are able to achieve. And earlier we used to build, these models for every small task like data cleaning or questioning answer system, handling multilingual things. But now, especially with OpenAI releasing GPT models and Meta coming up with their Llama models, they have been trained on such huge number of tasks that like if somebody is even trying to build a very basic bot, they don't have to just take care of, they don't have to take care of everything. They can just take care of the basic instructions and they can at least build a basic bot. Obviously, if you want to go a little advanced, then you need to try out different things. But it has become very easy to at least build a simple chatbot.
since you spoke about a little bit of the solution stack, right? To build a conversational AI solution, what does the tech stack look like? What are some of the modules and components that go into building that? I mean, we've all heard of the LLM, we've all heard of vector databases, but just could you just help us elaborate that a little more on what else is there? That would be great.
First of all, I think we need to choose the language you need to code in, but I think mostly people go for Python, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this LangChain library, which people
Mm-hmm.
are using a lot, that provides you a
Mm-hmm.
lot of modules uh, to choose your LLM, to choose the parser of the LLM, right? You want your output of the LLM to be in a certain kind of a format,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you would also want to choose a template of writing a prompt.
Mm-hmm.
So by prompt is an instruction that you give to the LLM, right?
Yeah.
So mostly people these days are going for LangChain based solutions
Yeah.
to create the entire stack for their conversational AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've been also been using that very heavily. Apart from that, you need to also choose what kind of LLM you want to use,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because cost is a very big factor for companies,
Yeah.
right? And depending on the problem statement you have,
Mm-hmm.
you may want to use a small LLM which you can deploy on your own virtual machine,
Yeah.
or you can if you don't have your own virtual machine or cloud-based solutions,
Mm-hmm.
then you can use the APIs that have been provided by OpenAI or Azure
Right.
OpenAI.
Yeah. From your experience, right? When a beginner or an amateur builds a conversational AI system versus a professional data scientist building it, what are some of the differences in the steps or the stack that you see in these two scenarios?
Correct. So I think if you are a beginner, right, people are using what is called a RAG approach,
Mm-hmm.
Retrieval Augmented Generation approach, where
Mm-hmm.
they do not want to train the model from scratch,
Mm-hmm.
because that requires resources and also creating a data set in a certain way, which
Yeah.
everybody is not able to create, or they don't have the facility in the company
Mm.
to have a manually tagged data,
Yeah.
right? So by using RAG based approaches, you can actually
Mm.
ground your data to your
Mm.
ground the data based on your company requirements,
Yeah.
and still get the results which are in the purview of your company,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then I think along with RAG, what people use is prompt tuning,
Mm-hmm.
where they tune the prompt in a way that it's able to very specifically answer the particular questions in a certain way and not answer uh, for specific use case. For example, if you you can actually restrict your conversational AI system to
Mm-hmm.
not answer abusive or harassing kind of queries, right?
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
give very strict instructions
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And also, to being a conversational AI piece, you would want to have a certain level of empathy towards your users,
Mm-hmm.
right? Towards your customers, basically, so
Mm-hmm.
that they feel that actually an human is talking. So you can
Mm-hmm.
also tweak your LLM to give your responses in a more empathetic or a humanly fashion.
Yeah.
Now, if you are actually a very seasoned or a trained data scientist and you have
Mm-hmm.
sufficient resources, then you
Mm-hmm.
can go for fine tuning the model as well.
Mm-hmm.
This will obviously improve the accuracy of your output, but
Yeah.
also it takes if it also takes a lot of resources. So
Mm-hmm.
fine tuning is basically only training a certain layers of the model and not
Mm-hmm.
training it from scratch.
Yeah.
And I think one step ahead is basically if you can also train the model from scratch, which I think is very few companies across the industry are doing,
Doing that.
right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So mostly what I've seen is like even the new data scientists as well as somewhere seasoned data scientists, they are going for RAG prompt tuning, and like if they have the experience, then they're going for fine tuning.
Understood. Got it. Makes sense. And could you maybe give us some examples of the various ways of interacting, which is RAG, prompt tuning, fine tuning? Could you maybe help us understand for what kind of use cases would you choose one of these approaches, or would you by default do RAG or this for all use cases based on the quality you expect? How do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I think the way so when we were building the conversational bots, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I think it's always better to not directly move to fine tuning, especially on the conversational AI piece. If you want to simply identify the question of the customer, which he can ask in any of the ways, right? So especially coming from an Indian startup, we have customers who may not be asking in the right grammatical way, right, or in the right English, or they can even talk in a bit of Hindi and English, right? So to handle all of these scenarios, you can first start with a simple RAG approach, right, and complement it with prompt tuning, right? And then, for example, if I talk about Slice, we have a borrow product, which is a loan product, or you have a payments product, right? And you know that the queries are going to be restricted to just these cases. So you can provide all your data, which has been manually evaluated by your customer experience team, feed it into the system and start fine tuning, right? And just over time, see the results if they're improving. Otherwise, I think mostly like even the industry experts have advised that, prompt tuning and RAG mostly suffices for everyone. You don't need to move to fine tuning. For very specific cases, if you think that, it's not, the accuracy is very low from RAGs and prompt tuning, you can go for fine tuning. But for us, mostly the cases have been handled by the first two.
First two, okay. And just for the benefit of people listening to this, Aditi, to make it clear, by prompt tuning, you mean providing whatever necessary context as part of that prompt itself. And by RAG, you mean you're pointing the prompt to something else. Maybe the information is in a vector DB or something like that as part of the context, right? Okay.
Yes.
So
yes.
a follow-up question on that I have is, with this ever-increasing context windows that we see for the prompts, what do you think is going to happen with the RAG? Do you think RAG is going to become less and less relevant with context windows just becoming larger and larger?
Yeah. So I think one of the best ways that we've seen of using RAG is since the accuracy of RAG is not very high.
Yeah.
So we basically use it to shortlist from the wide array of questions, right? So for example, let's say you have a standard every company has a standard operating procedure, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's say you have about 3,000 questions which the customer can ask for a particular product. You include all variations of product questions that can actually happen. Now, you can do a prompt tuning directly on those 3,000 questions and extract the best question. But I think a more intelligent way of doing it would be to first pass it through RAG, index it. I mean, like get the top list of, let's say, 50 odd questions, which are closest to your question. And then on those 50 questions, you can pass it through prompt tuning and get the best answer. So I think RAG will not go away. It will, like initially, I would say, complement the prompt tuning. And at some stage, and also, if we are increasing the context window, our cost also increases a lot, right? And every company can't afford that. So I don't think so. People, even with a huge context window, would directly pass this data to the prompt tuning.
Understood. Okay, that's a valid point. Yeah. Since you've been working on data science and AI pre-LLM and post-LLM, right? What has fundamentally changed in building a conversational AI product with an LLM and without an LLM in terms of quality, time, speed?
Yeah, I think all three of them, right? Speed and time, I mean, has reduced a lot.
Yeah.
As I said earlier as well, right? We had to build a machine learning model for every small task. So if I talk about the like for Slice, right? If we had been building in pre-generative AI era, then we would have to build separate models to handle multilingual nature of text, right? We would have to build a separate dependency parser model, especially a separate entity recognition model, and then a separate question answering model. But now, the lot of steps have been automated for us. We don't have to handle multilingual because OpenAI and even other models take care of that. They have been trained on Indian languages. Then data cleaning and summarization tasks are handled very beautifully by these LLMs, right? So that kind of reduces a lot of your time. So earlier we used to write a lot of regex expressions to remove irrelevant words, so on and so forth. We don't have to do that.
Yeah.
right? Uh, and uh, and then obviously the question answering system that we used to build earlier, right? We had to give every possible scenario to the model so that
Yeah.
it would have seen every kind of text before replying to the customer, right? But
Right.
now, since it's already been trained on a huge model,
Yeah.
we don't have to put that much amount of data into the
Mm-hmm.
system,
Mm-hmm.
right? But at the same time, I'm not saying that generative AI is a magical wand.
Mm.
It comes with its own share of problems,
Yeah.
which obviously have improved over time.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if I talk about hallucinations, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're actually opening a generative AI model to a customer, and you cannot be 100% sure that it will always uh, reply exactly what you want, right?
Yes.
There's still a 0.1% error by which it can do some random text generation and reply to the customer, which at times can be very, I would say, harmful for the company as well, right? So I think at present stage it's helped data scientists a lot, but at the same time we need to also exercise caution.
Mm. Okay. Got it. And in fintech, what do you think are the primary problems or business metrics that conversational AI is help kind of enhancing?
Yeah. So I'll talk from a CX perspective, like the customer experience
Sure.
perspective as
Yeah.
well, right? So I think one of the primary aspect is 24/7 availability. So
Yeah.
earlier, like if you have keep an agent, you have to give a night shift, right? But
Hmm.
if you have a conversational AI bot, then at least in the odd hours, you don't have to actually make a human being sit there. He's
Hmm.
actually replying the questions on behalf of the
Yeah.
agent, and
Hmm.
that has actually improved our first resolution time and the first response time,
Hmm.
right? So basically what I mean to say is that how quickly you're able to respond to the customers,
Yeah.
that's your first response time,
Hmm.
and how quickly you're able to resolve the query of the customer,
Hmm.
right? So that kind will actually reduce by a lot when you kind of deploy these solutions. And also the number of I would say complaints or tickets or calls, if you're also involving generative AI and the calls aspect, will also be handled more and efficiently uh, per day basis
Hmm.
as compared to without generative AI models.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm not talking about the structured data, but from the
Hmm.
unstructured data perspective, like on the
Yeah.
images and the text, right? The precision and the recall, which are the usual metrics that we kind of target for, right? These metrics for the models have also improved by a
Yeah.
lot because the contextual understanding has improved a lot
Hmm.
with these generative AI models.
Hmm. Understood. And since you mentioned 24/7 support and the first response time improves a lot, right? Um, and these models are known to hallucinate. Could you maybe help us understand for what category of question, what level of hallucination do you see, even when you expose it to a customer? If somebody says, "What's the interest rate on my loan?" Is there any hallucination for that question? Or if somebody says, "How do I record my password?" Is there like what percentage of hallucination for what kind of questions do you typically see in production?
I mean, it's hard to define it that way, but I
Hmm.
mean,
Hmm.
so I'm talking about a year back, right? When
Yeah.
generative AI had just come. I mean, it was not like it had just come, but
Yeah.
the GPT-3 models had come,
Yeah.
and it sort of democratized AI for everyone.
Hmm.
Then the hallucination levels were very high,
I
but
see.
now, I mean, there are tool callings and ways to actually restrict hallucination to a lot. So
Hmm.
that is why I said the degree of hallucination has decreased, but
Hmm.
you can still not be 100% sure
Hmm.
that your model will reply exactly the way you want. But
Yeah.
at the same time, you can restrict or tell it what not to do,
Yeah.
right? Very
Hmm.
specifically, and it will
Hmm.
not, right? If
Yeah.
you have, made the model in the correct way. But
Hmm.
over time, I mean, it's very difficult to quantify
Yeah.
exactly how much hallucination it will make, but
Hmm.
the way to understand that is you have a human in the loop,
Hmm.
and you kind of evaluate these models again and again over time to see
Hmm.
that how these models are performing.
Yeah.
So if I had to just give you an example of CX, right? So
Hmm.
what we've done is that instead of directly exposing them to the customers, right, you
Yeah.
can have something which is called as the agent assist bots, where
Okay.
you're assisting the agents in replying to the customers. So there's
Mhm.
still a human in the loop who
Yeah.
is evaluating your recommendations and then tweaking them if he wants, and then replying to the customers, right? And as these models sort of mature and you feel confident enough that they can be exposed directly to the customers,
Yeah.
then you can proceed that way.
Makes sense. Okay. In fact, my next topic was going to be just challenges of implementing and taking these models to production. And you were talking about hallucination. And one way to overcome the hallucination, as you mentioned, was doing things like tool calling. Could you maybe just help us understand what do you mean by tool calling and what other solution avenues are there to minimize hallucination?
Right.
Mhm.
So tool calling is nothing but you define functions,
Mhm.
like the way you used to define functions earlier as well, with a
Mhm.
specific task in mind,
Yeah.
right? So, for example, I mean, if I have a customer query coming and I either want to route it to a sales team or a service team, then
Mhm.
I have instructions clearly said that if so and so words are mentioned in the query, then
Mhm.
direct it to the sales team, otherwise to the service team,
Yeah.
right? So that kind of restricts the randomness to the query, and it knows exactly where to assign, right?
Mhm.
One of the two scenarios,
Mhm.
right? And then, as I mentioned earlier, right, in the prompts, so prompts is not very simple. It's not just about writing in English, because there's no actual person sitting at the back understanding your instructions, right?
Mhm.
So there are various ways of writing prompts, or something which is
Mhm.
called as like a chain of thoughts. You make it understand in a step-by-step procedure
Yeah.
exactly what you want,
Mhm.
and then you mention what not you don't want it to do. So if
Mhm.
you don't want the bot to answer abusive cases, you don't want bot to answer anything beyond the financial domain, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
this way your hallucinations reduces by a lot,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
like there are a lot of guides which tell you about various ways of writing prompts. So you have react, you have chain of thoughts, you have tree of thoughts, which helps you to kind of break your instruction template
Mhm.
into small steps, which make it
Yeah.
very easier for the LLM to understand,
Mhm.
right? And the last way, obviously, if you fine tune it to a very specific task, then
Yeah.
obviously it won't hallucinate.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And I'm curious. This is not directly relevant to conversational AI, but just broadly inside a fintech company or any other company you work with, and let's say you decide you want to build a conversational AI solution. There are tons of SaaS off-the-shelf solutions available out there. How do you decide on a build versus buy kind of decision for a specific tool you want to build?
Yeah. So I think being part of the financial domain, especially in
Mm,
India, right,
mm,
we have a lot of compliance consideration that
mm,
we need to take,
mm,
right? So like being governed by RBI, and
mm,
as a fintech which totally follows the rules of the RBI, we have to be very
mm,
sure that our data does not go into foreign servers, right?
mm,
They need to be only present in Indian servers. Then second is
mm,
obviously the cost
mm,
aspect, right?
mm,
Does the cost actually make sense for us or not to have a buy solution? And
mm,
then it's also about the time to market, right? So if we need that solution right now, and
mm,
the company, I mean, the bandwidth is such that it's we cannot build it right now, it's better to have it from outside, and then over
yeah,
time build an in-house solution,
yeah,
right? So I think all three of these plays in mind when deciding whether to go for a buy versus build. It's not exactly a no to a buy,
yeah,
but it
yeah.
all depends on these three factors. If you're able to have it from the compliance perspective, from the cost perspective, and obviously if we can build it in house, and that is relatively cheaper for us.
Okay, makes sense. And finally, Aditi, we'd love to know what sources do you go to stay updated on the latest of what's happening in AI?
Yeah. So I think number one sources for me is the conferences that happen,
Mm,
I think, around the world. So, I mean, I make sure that if it's in India, that I'm either able to join it virtually, or if
mm,
I can be present in person, then I do that, because
mm,
what new products and what is the roadmap of companies it becomes very easier to know that if you should build it from scratch within your company, or you should still wait for 2-3 months because that product is anyways going to come from OpenAI or like Meta and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
that is one. Then I think now YouTube and even like Medium, all these places, there's this huge information about all the data science guides, what's
Mm.
new happening in LLM. If you want to deep dive into the algorithms, so on and so forth. And I
Yeah.
think lately, like very recently, I will say, I've also started watching the Project Pro videos,
Oh,
like by the seasoned leaders, what they're doing
okay.
in terms of LLMs. And that actually gives you an idea that, okay, across the industry, how people are thinking about it. Because I
Hmm.
know there's still this, being a new thing, people are
Hmm.
still not very sure that, if they should directly implement in the market,
Yeah.
and how they are using this piece of technology
Hmm.
for their company use cases, and if we can actually get inspired from them and use it for our company as well. So I think all three of them helps me to get be updated about the LLMs and generative AI, and in data science in general, actually.
Thank you. Thanks for spending time on the Project Pro videos. So, Aditi, this has been wonderful, extremely helpful to me and the audience. Thank you for taking time to do this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny. Thank you so much.